Hello, I'm going to be talking to you today about the virus infectious disease ontology and the COVID-19 infectious disease ontology, some of the motivations for developing these ontologies, some of the background, why we even need ontologies, etc. This will be a brief talk, first in a series of talks on these topics, so more or less to give you the preliminary background needed to think and reflect and understand the ontologies proper later. But right now, we'll talk about motivation first. So look, check this out. Prostate cancer researchers recently have leveraged some existing research on enzymes that are very commonly studied in their literature that happen, just as a matter of chance, happen to be crucial in the penetration of host cells by SARS-CoV-2. And they've noticed that by appealing to this sort of research, they can potentially explain differences in the disease severity across sex. Look, immunologists, they've combined insights from researchers on SARS-CoV-1 and MERS with chemical compound profile data to identify drug and vaccine options for SARS-CoV-2. Pediatric researchers observing children have fewer nasal epithelia susceptible to SARS-CoV-2 infection when compared to adults. They've also suggested that this difference partially explains symptom disparities between the groups. Look, insights across life disciplines or life science disciplines are clearly important, but look, there's too much data. Volume, speed, range, quality, all of these things make it difficult, nearly impossible, in fact, for just manual inspection. Even if you're an expert, like you can't know everything. You have to rely on other experts, and even when they're in your own discipline, it's hard to keep up with the material. This is one of the reasons why we use computers to help us do this sort of thing. They're much faster. It's sort of like brute force explanation. Data sciences in particular, look for patterns across large data sets. But to be able to do this, we have to have data sort of coded in comparable language. But unfortunately, data sets are often annotated in specific terminologies to disciplines, coded in systems by researchers parochially. This makes like the resulting multidimensional diverse data sets like uninteroperable. Computers are dumb. That's they tell you they do exactly what you tell them to, and if you code data sets in two different languages, unless you have a translator between them, you're not going to be able to support automated reasoning across those data sets. Um, it's been well known ontologies, shared interoperable, logically well-defined controlled vocabularies that can facilitate this sort of computer interoperability in life science disciplines. They have provided a common reliable language for making sort of cross-field comparisons. The gene ontology is perhaps the best known example, and in 2000 it spurred an explosion of biomedical ontologies. Gene ontology, of course, codes a lot of different gene terms that people reuse again and again as a common language when talking about this content. You see it come up all over the place in life science journals, the Lancet, New England Journal of Medicine. People use this stuff. But look, the very success of the gene ontology led to a problem, namely the reemergence of data silos, specifically in ontology circles. Researchers just basically kept doing what they were doing when they were coding their own data, just now in ontological terms. But this unfortunately also undermined interoperability. There was, simply put, a lack of coordination. Using an ontology alone is not enough. You have to use an ontology or ontological approaches in a coordinated fashion. This led to the development of the Open Biomedical and Biological Ontologies Foundry, created in 2007. It provides guidance for ontology developers while promoting alignment and interoperability. The Foundry principles require that ontologies use a well-specified syntax, so unambiguous terms. They share a common space of identifiers. So if somebody uses a term cell, for instance, or defines the term cell, um, that's that's the term that you're going to use if you're going to talk about cells. If it's in the Foundry, right? You're not going to like go around making new ones, and you're going to make it common and open to other people to use. Now, that led naturally into being openly available in the public domain for use, and developed in a collaborative fashion with ontologies covering nearby domains. So, an ontology covering cells is probably also going to be developed alongside an ontology covering blood. Now, they're going to have overlap, but some terms are going to be in the cell ontology, other terms are going to be in the blood ontology, but they should coordinate their efforts work together, not in contrast to one another. Similarly, ontologies should be developed in a modular fashion, which also combines here, namely having a clearly specified scope. So ontologies don't need to do everything, but they need to be clear about what they do, and they need to, divide and conquer. The life science domain is very large, and again, no ontology can do everything, but little modular ontologies combined together can do much. So they should also use common, unambiguously defined relations between their terms. This basically means if you're going to define a relationship between two entities or two terms, then you should basically make it very clear what terms relate to what terms and what the sort of formal properties are with respect to the relation. Like, is the relation transitive? Is it symmetric? Stuff like that. So they should also conform to a common top-level architecture. Now, this is worth pausing a bit on. So the OBO Foundry itself, the library consists of over 200 ontologies which seek to abide by these principles. And the top-level ontology, that architecture, is given by the basic formal ontology, which has recently become an ISO-approved standard. And it itself covers general classes like material, entity, quality, process, etc. This is the starting point for other ontologies. BFO is the top level. It's the place that covers the most general terms, from which more specific ontologies will construct their domains now, or terms covering their domains. Here is just a quick overview. You see at the very tip top there, entity. And then entities are divided into two sorts of things, continuous and occurrence. Continuous being, like you and me, things that exist entirely and completely whenever they do exist at all, and occurrence, which are like processes, things that exist over time. Now, this is not a talk on BFO. I will point you to Barry Smith, who has given many, many talks about this. He can do it much better than I can. But yeah, here's the general overview, or general overview, the top level overview of the OBO Foundry ontologies, BFO. Now, look, where BFO is supposed to be domain neutral, it just kind of covers it all, not in much detail, just given, again, like a top layer for other ontologies. OBO Foundry ontologies are domain specific. They represent entities of things that you would more commonly talk about in your life if you're a researcher, like disease or cell division or surgical procedure. And these more specific ontologies are constructed by downward population from BFO. So you start with BFO, and then you make more specific terms and based on the terms that BFO starts with. So everything is either whatever ontology, whatever OBO Foundry ontology you're going to build, everything is either going to be an occurrent or going to be a continuant. Generally speaking, that is where you would begin. Now, this leads naturally to infectious disease ontology, which is an extension of BFO to the domain of infectious diseases, just like the name says. This IDO core is what we call it, has provided researchers and domains terms for covering specific infectious diseases. And extensions are guided by these OBO Foundry principles, and they facilitate computer-aided cross-discipline insights like the ones we began with. Here's some examples, and this arrow indicating extensions. So you start with IDO core, and then you extend to, on what we have over here on the far left, a brucellosis ontology. And then after that, you have a meningitis, and then a flu ontology. Again, these are specific sort of infectious diseases. Right here, one that we will talk about in some length is CITO, recently developed and added to the OBO Foundry library. It is the coronavirus infectious disease ontology. Now, look, this is also a sort of starting point. IDO core is for the virus infectious disease ontology. There have been lots and lots of virus ontologies. We saw a couple. It's sort of like the number, the array. They suggest the need for what we call a reference ontology, which is sort of a middle ground between an ontology like IDO, which covers infectious diseases in general, and more specific infectious diseases, namely, in this case, specific infectious diseases with respect to viruses. And so all virus ontologies, for instance, are going to have some common terms, like, for instance, the term virus. Virus itself is not a term in the infectious disease ontology. But, again, a middle ground. It's going to be a term that's common to all virus extensions. And so with that and several other terms, makes sense to make a modular ontology covering just those terms common to all those viruses or virus ontologies. Now, this itself is going to be extended by the coronavirus infectious disease ontology, which was developed recently by the Hague Group, and that cyto ontology or coronavirus infectious disease ontology itself provides a foundation for the COVID-19 infectious disease ontology, which me and my team have developed over this past summer. Here's some broad relationships among these. You can see over at the top, ida-core, then there's a idovirus, the virus infectious disease ontology, then cyto, ido, COVID-19, and some terms which we will discuss in quite a bit more depth in other talks. Thanks.